Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Jaws. Now, Jaws came out in the summer of 1975, and the film is directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, this was not Spielberg's first movie, but this is definitely the movie which made Spielberg into what he is now, because now he's probably one of the most recognizable filmmakers of all time. Like, even people who know nothing about movies instantly recognize who Steven Spielberg is. Now, Spielberg did do a few movies before this. Perhaps the most famous of the movies that he did before this would be the 1971 made-for-TV movie Duel. Now, Jaws is based on the 1974 novel of the same name by Peter Benchley. Now, I have read the book, and I'm going to address some of the major differences between the movie and the book later on in this review, and believe me, there are a lot of differences. Now, to call Jaws a classic would be an understatement. Jaws was a milestone in movie history, and this is one of those movies which really did change the entire landscape of films in general. Like, both this and George Lucas's Star Wars, which came out 2 years later, are the films which really did change the entire landscape of movies and filmmaking. Like, movies were not the same after Jaws and Star Wars came out, and both of those films became phenomenons, and now everybody knows Jaws and Star Wars. Like, you would have to leave the planet to meet somebody who has never heard of Jaws or Star Wars. Like, Jaws and Star Wars, as I said, really did change movies in general. I think even more so than films like The Godfather and The Exorcist. Now, before Jaws, in the early 1970s, you started to see a few killer animal movies like Frogs and Phase 4, which was about killer ants, came out before Jaws, but after Jaws, you started to see a countless number of killer animal movies, which were all definitely trying to cash in on the success of Jaws. Like, you had movies like Day of the Animals and Grizzly, which is one of my personal favorites, and Orca, the Killer Whale. Like, you started to see a lot of these Jaws ripoffs and knockoffs and cash-ins after Jaws came out. And shark movies really have become kind of a subgenre unto themselves. Like, even today, something stupid like Sharknado still owes something to Jaws. Actually, if you want a better example than Sharknado for a recent movie that was clearly influenced by Jaws, there was the movie The Shallows, which just came out this year, 2016, which was a really good movie, but that film was definitely influenced by Jaws. Now, the plot of Jaws is it begins where this girl goes out swimming, and she ends up getting attacked by a shark, and the next morning, this guy she was with ends up reporting her missing to the police, and the main character of the movie, Martin Brody, who is the chief of police in the small town that this movie takes place in, him and this guy that the girl was with go out to the beach, and they find the remains of this girl washed up on the beach, and it becomes pretty obvious to both of them that this was a shark attack. And what happens is, in the movie, Chief Brody tries to close the beaches, but the mayor argues that if they close the beaches, that could severely damage the town's economy. So what ends up happening in the movie is, because the mayor keeps the beaches open, more people end up getting attacked by this shark. The movie eventually leads goes to Chief Brody, this shark expert named Matt Hooper, and this fisherman named Captain Quint, going out to look for this shark, which turns out to be a great white, so they could hopefully kill it. Now, Jaws, in my opinion, is one of the most perfect films ever made, and one of the things that makes this movie so great is the fact that it's a very genre-defying film, because it is a horror film, but it's also very much a drama film as well, and it's also an action-adventure movie, and there's a lot of humor in Jaws, but the humor in this movie is a very naturalistic kind of humor. Like, it's the kind of humor that you can see real people making even in a horrific situation, like the situation that the characters in the movie get in. So, once again, it's a horror film, it's a drama film, it's an action-adventure film, and it's also somewhat of a naturalistic comedy, and that's one of the things that makes this movie so perfect, is it balances all these genres very well. And I think that's one of the reasons why, even though this is a horror film, this movie also appeals to people who aren't horror fans, because it has all these elements from all these different genres. And one of the things that really makes this movie work for me is the characters. Like, this is a very character-driven movie, and it's really the characters that make this movie work. And it's really the acting and the characters which really makes you buy the premise of this movie, because the premise of the film is a little far-fetched when you stop to think about it. Now, I'm no expert on sharks, but I'm pretty sure something like this would not happen the same way in real life, and also a lot of people that I know who do know a lot more about sharks than I do actually say that something like what the shark does in this movie is actually not a common thing for sharks to do. But thanks to the acting and the characters, you buy the premise, even if the premise is a little far-fetched. Now, as I said, I really do think Jaws is one of the most perfect films ever made, but it almost wasn't as good as it ended up being, because originally Spielberg intended this to be much more of a B-movie. Like, originally they were going to show the shark a lot more often, but the reason they didn't was because they were having technical problems. Like, the mechanical shark they used for the shark in this movie was not working properly, so that's the reason you don't see the shark that much till towards the end, and that had to be like one of the most beautiful accidents to ever happen, because part of what makes this movie so suspenseful is the fact that you don't see the shark that much till towards the end, but if the mechanical shark they used for the shark in this movie actually worked, this film would have been much more of a B-movie, so it's pretty much a beautiful accident that this film did not turn out to be the way Spielberg originally intended, and if this film did turn out to be the B-movie that it originally was going to be, I probably wouldn't even be talking about it right now. Like, the film probably would have fallen into obscurity. But yeah, as I said, it's the characters that really make this movie work. Like, the characters are very believable. Like, the character of Chief Brody, who in the movie is played by Schneider, is a very believable and very likable character. Now, one of my favorite moments of the movie is... Now, there's a certain point in the movie where this little boy ends up getting killed by the shark, and the boy's mother blames Brody for not being able to close the beaches, and there's a certain scene where she confronts him about this, and you can tell that he also blames himself, and there's a scene after this confrontation between Brody and the boy's mother where Brody's at his kitchen table, and you could tell he's just feeling like absolute shit. But his son is there, and his son is like mimicking all the things that he's doing, and in a way you could tell it's kind of the boy's way of trying to cheer his father up, and you can tell it does kind of cheer Brody up a little bit, and it's a scene that's both sad and funny and adorable at the same time, and it's such a human moment in the movie. In the movie, you also have the character of Matt Hooper, played brilliantly by Richard Dreyfuss, and Matt Hooper is such a likable character, and he's a very funny character as well. In the movie, you also have the character of Captain Quint, played by Robert Shaw, who does a brilliant job as Quint, and one of the things I like so much about Quint is, like, he is a likable character, but you can tell there's something very off about him, and you find out later on that he's actually a World War II vet, and he actually was on the Indianapolis, which was a ship that was sunk by the Japanese during World War II, and many of the survivors got lost at sea and were attacked by sharks, and he gives this really creepy speech at the end of the movie about his experiences on the Indianapolis, and Robert Shaw does such a great job in this movie as the character of Quint, and apparently he was actually drunk out of his mind when he was playing this character, which kinda adds to the character in a way. And Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw all had great chemistry with each other in this movie. Like, I love the scenes at the end of the movie where they're out at sea looking for this shark, and I love the chemistry between these three characters. And one thing I thought was interesting about the three men in this movie is each one kind of represents a different class in society. Like, you have Matt Hooper, who actually says that he's rich at one point in the movie, and he kind of represents the upper class, and then you have Chief Brody, who kind of represents the middle class, and then you have Quint, who kind of represents the lower class. Now, I don't know if that was intentional or not, or if I'm just digging way too deeply into this film. Now, Jaws is based on the book by Peter Benchley. Now, I have read the book, and I really do like the book, but the movie is actually quite different from the book, and truthfully, I think it's a good thing that it is so different from the book, because there were a lot of things in the book that would not have translated well to film. For example, in the book, there was this whole subplot about how the mayor of Anime was in debt to the mafia, and the reason he was trying to keep the beaches open was so he can pay back all his debts to the mob. They left that subplot out of the film, which I think is a good thing, because while it may have worked in the book, it would not have worked well in the film. Another subplot that they removed from the book was, in the book there was this whole thing where you found out that Chief Brody's wife actually knew Matt Hooper's brother, and there's a certain point where Matt Hooper and Brody's wife actually have an affair. That was left out of the film, and once again, I think that's for the betterment of the film, because while it worked in the book, it would not have worked well in the movie. But one thing I thought was cool when I read the book is the book actually takes place on Long Island, which I thought was cool because I actually live on Long Island. Now, Peter Benchley, who wrote the book, actually has a brief cameo appearance in this movie as a reporter. Now, Jaws is not one of those movies that necessarily needed sequels, but of course, because this movie was such a big hit, they ended up making sequels. In 1978, you had Jaws 2, and in 1983, you had Jaws 3, and in 1986, you had Jaws the Revenge, and in the 90s there was an Italian film called Jaws 5 Cruel Jaws, which was directed by Bruno Mattei. Now that is not officially a Jaws sequel, it's actually a ripoff of Jaws that just happens to slap the title Jaws 5 on it. Now, before I end this review, I actually had a few friends of mine record their own mini-reviews on Jaws, so if you're interested, here are a few mini-reviews that my friends did on this film.
Hello, audience of Canto 1408, how's it going? I'm Eric Casey over at Dreammaker Productions. Christian asked me to come over and, or not come over, but appear in this video to talk about Jaws, so here I am, and that's what I'm going to do, so here I go. Basically, for me, Jaws is one of Spielberg's best movies. It kind of reminds me of his first feature film, Duel. And the reason why I say that is because the films are very similar because they're just pure suspense. They're suspense at its finest. It's a suspense movie at its finest. And what I like about Jaws is for two things. One is that you don't really see the shark too much, and your imagination kind of runs wild and kind of helps you develop the fear that way. Because for a good portion of the movie, you don't see the shark until literally you see how big the shark is when what's his name says, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." Literally, that's the first instance where you see him, and then you see how much of a big deal this shark is. And the second thing, which I find is kind of interesting, where more modern day movies I feel like get criticized a lot for, which is basically slow pacing. The movie is about, I'd say, like, how long is it? It's 2 hours and 4 minutes. It's a surprisingly long movie, and it feels its length a lot. You can make the argument that things could have been cut down a little bit, but the thing is, I actually feel like it works to its advantage, the film, and for it being so long. Without some of those sequences, you wouldn't care as much for the characters as you do towards the end of the movie. When what's his name is sitting at the dinner table with his family, or when the main characters are sitting on the boat and they're all having a drink and stuff, and just telling their stories, showing off their scars and everything. Like, those moments really bring out the personalities of the characters and really develops them and really makes them feel like real people. And I feel like those characters would be less, and you, the audience, would care less if we didn't have those sequences in there. Basically what I'm saying here is that sequences that are slow-paced, they can help you. They can be to your advantage in developing characters or revealing personalities of characters. In simplest of terms, character development, which is one of the most essential, important things in a movie. So, to me, Jaws is one of Spielberg's best films. I really love it. I love it to death. It's one of my favorite Spielberg movies. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything I had to say on it, and I'll see you guys later.
Well, I love Jaws. Jaws is, to me, is one of the great American films. One of the things I love about it is that it seems to take certain archetypes of human personality, at least Freudian archetypes, I guess, and put them together. Very similar to like the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where there's three men, and they all represent a certain aspect of the psyche, right? And in Jaws, you have Quint, who's very sort of down to earth. He's very, instinctual. So he would be like the id, right? The Freudian part of the unconscious, right? Of the id. And then you have somebody like Hooper, who's very intelligent, right? He's a scientist, and he'd be like kind of like the superego. And then you have Roy Scheider's character, right? Is
Brody,
yeah. Right? Brody. So you have Brody, who is the ego. He's kind of like a little bit of Quint and a little bit of Brody. Of Hooper. And he kind of negotiates between the two, you know. So I always thought that was very interesting. Is that, you know, going back to Freud's view of the psyche, of that having those three aspects to the psyche, and that's why I think it's really interesting about the film, you know. And it's interesting that in the film, it's the id that's destroyed, right? Because, and you know, you can even see the shark also as sort of a representative of the primal unconscious, you know, predator. And it's almost as if saying, and Steven Spielberg saying, is that, you know, in society we have no room for the id. We have to sort of find some way to negotiate that, because if we unleash that primal predatory sort of instinct that we have within ourselves, it's going to destroy us. Well, again, another kind of similar to my view of The Exorcist. I think the film Jaws is so much better than the book. I think the book, again, is kind of hacky. I think the subplots about like the mafia and like Hooper having an affair with Brody's wife, I was like, I didn't understand that. But the biggest letdown is the end of the end of the book. And I don't know if you want me to say the end of the book, but the end of the book is very anticlimactic. Let's put it that way. It's nowhere near as rousing and as exciting and as suspenseful as the end of the film. Like, the end of the film is one of the most brilliant endings in film history, whereas the novel kind of just peters out at the end.
Hello, my friend Christian has asked me to do a short video on the movie Jaws. And I have to say, Jaws is one of my all-time favorite movies. I know some people who say it's one of those movies that's actually better than the book. I don't necessarily agree with that, because I do love the book as well. Now, the movie does make some changes that I think are very smart and necessary to take it from the page to the screen. And the movie is a near perfect suspense horror film. One of the things I like the most about it is it's a very scary film, but it understands that while, yes, the idea of a giant shark terrorizing this small community and eating people is scary, what makes it even scarier is that it presents you with characters who are fully realized, complex, authentic, relatable, people you really get invested in and care about. So as the film goes along and you get to know these people, when the shit really hits the fan, it's even more intense and more terrifying because you care about these people. It's also just a perfect suspense film. I mean, the suspense and tension gradually ratchets up, like one level at a time, and it understands it doesn't have to give you everything up front. It can build and then really pay off. It also knows when to show what and when. It doesn't show you the whole shark right away. It's a lot of just glimpses here and there. I mean, you're well into the film before you see the whole shark, and that actually, knowing it's out there but not quite seeing it all, it actually gets you more into it and more, excited to see what's coming. I really do think Spielberg outdid himself here. I mean, he's done a lot of great films, but in this film for the horror genre, it's a classic for a reason, and I just think it is one of the best horror films out there.
Hey there everyone, my name is Mark. You may know me from the Friday Sagas or Froman Productions. My YouTube channel is Froman Vid Productions, and as you can see behind me, I am an avid shark fanatic. So Christian, when he decided to do this, decided to ask me to give my 2 cents on Jaws. So, the movie Jaws is revolutionary in the aspect of there's so many movie aspects about Jaws that just revolutionized the movie industry. Like, for example, one of the big things when shooting Jaws was that you don't always have to see the shark to be scared of it. Sometimes it's not it's what you don't see is what scares you the most. And I thought that was, because a lot of times they have, you don't even see the shark and it's still terrifying. Another thing they did in Jaws, which was insane, was something called a Vertigo Shot. It's a very tricky shot where basically you zoom in with the camera while pulling out, doing the opposite direction, or you zoom in while pulling out. You zoom out while pulling in. You do the opposite of what the camera's doing, and it kind of warps the background. Yeah, I don't think it was the first Vertigo shot, but it was one of the first ones used in a production that big. Jaws changed a lot of things about sharks in general. After the book and the movie came out, shark hunting gained a lot of popularity. A lot of people were terrified to go in the water after Jaws came out. People were more, educated on shark attacks after that. People didn't really consider it a possibility. They went to the beach, and after seeing Jaws, it kind of struck them as this could happen. Even though Jaws was extremely, that's not a common thing for a shark to do, people got terrified of it. And beach, I think the percent of people that went to the beach the few years after Jaws came out dropped dramatically after that. So, and then shark hunting increased crazily. Actually, the writer of the book actually wrote a letter apologizing for the book because he didn't, because the amount of sharks that were killed in shark hunting, he didn't plan or want that to happen with the production or release of Jaws. Some Jaws fun facts. Now, the shark in Jaws is a robot, as most people know, and is actually named by the cast and crew Bruce. Now, the shark in Finding Nemo, Bruce, is actually a tribute to Jaws. Jaws is it's not confirmed, but it is said to be based off a shark actually seen at Montauk, and I'm going there tomorrow, so wish me luck. The Jaws movie revolutionized so many things in horror movies, in shark culture. The world would not be what it was today. Shark Week is probably a big thanks to Shark Week being so popular just because of Jaws back in the day. But Jaws as a movie was phenomenal. The script was great, the camera angles, just everything about the movie was just flawless, especially for the time period. So it's a good movie, especially how many obstacles they met in the way of shooting. If you look up any background news about Jaws, there was a lot of things that went wrong while shooting. There was even a scene where a part where the boat sunk, and they had to and the cameras got wet, and they had to fly the footage out to New York to hopefully save it, which they did. But yeah, a lot of things went wrong on this project. So I mean, I don't know if any of them even realized when they were working on this, and probably the headaches it was causing them, that many years later, people are still going crazy about this movie.
So, I hope you guys enjoyed my friend's takes on this movie, and once again, that was my review on Jaws, and my next movie review will be Jaws 2.